With the release of iOS 14, Apple gave iPhone users the option to be able to opt out of sharing their data every time they open an app. As a result, seemingly overnight, platforms and advertisers lost insight into the activities of a billion iPhone owners around the world. And at the same time, new platforms like TikTok, Hulu are opening advertising options. Instagram Reels has grown popular enough to have ads be included. And Google, well, Google continues to be, well, Google, yeah? So if you're trying to run a marketing agency and build a portfolio of successful ad accounts for clients, it can all seem a bit overwhelming, perhaps maybe even hopeless. And that's where today's show comes in. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Agency Accelerated, where we explore ways to grow and scale your agency with some of the most trusted brands in the industry. We're live 6 Wednesdays this quarter at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time, and on the wonderful platforms of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So make sure you go to agorapulse.com/calendar and subscribe so you don't miss any of this season's episodes. Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie Liu, and we are very fortunate to have an incredible guest with us today. In this episode, we're talking about digital advertising and, well, specifically, how things have changed so dramatically in recent months. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to make sure that the work that I'm doing for clients is still relevant and successful. So stay until the very end because you'll get a chance to get your hands on yet another way to add more revenue to your marketing agency. So here's a quick shout out to our crew. We've got Deb Mitchell in the house. Hey, Deb, so wonderful to see you. We've got some amazing things that are happening. So if you're tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from, what type of advertising you're doing for clients. And also, here's a question for you. If you could show your clients advertising options that would help them reach their target audience more successfully than they can today, would that be helpful? Let me know in the comments. Go ahead and drop it in. So let's bring on today's guest. Come on through. Hey, John, how are you?
Hello, Stephanie. I'm doing quite well.
Doing well for a Wednesday, right? We're doing our best. That's good. So everyone, let me introduce you to John Lee. He's the head of evangelism at Microsoft, where he fosters a community of industry influencers and builds deep relationships with industry thought leaders. We were having a really insightful conversation in the green room, just talking about his role and all the different things that he does in order to build not only his personal brand, but his relationship with everyone in the industry on behalf of the company itself. So he also works to develop and execute an industry engagement strategy inclusive of, get this, content creation, strategic storytelling, public speaking, panel participation, blogging, and more to drive awareness, as well as the perception and adoption of the Microsoft advertising platform. That's, my friend, that is a lot. But wait,
It
friends, there's
is.
more. There's more. So, John is a digital advertising professional with extensive experience in search engine marketing, my first love, display advertising, social media advertising, and having owned his own agency for years. I'm telling you, this was a match made in heaven, is a genuine fanatic for all things digital. So, hey, John, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this industry has been my work home, as it were, for 15 years. And so it's the same age as my daughter. And so it's easy to keep track of.
That's clever. When I think about how long I've been married, I know like, oh, it's my daughter plus one. 'Cause
There you go.
her plus one, and that's how it works out. I want to give a quick shout out to Diana, who is tuning in from Colombia. Welcome. Welcome to Agency Accelerated. We're so excited to have you here. So, John, quick question for you.
Mhm.
Can you start off with sharing more about what you do for the advertising arm of Microsoft and what they currently offer?
Absolutely. So my role, head of evangelism is relatively nebulous as a job title goes. Um, and as you illustrated, the role is wide reaching. And so, where I would start is yes, I manage a group of influencers, inclusive of agency owners, folks at some tool providers, but also folks from the media, say, search engine land, search engine journal, media post, etc. And I meet with these individuals monthly, and it's a two-way street here. I'm coming to the table with product updates and insights from data that we're looking at and our teams are looking at, and giving these folks kind of a look down the path. But then they're also providing valuable feedback, to me, yes, but also to directly to folks from engineering or other parts of marketing. So it's a wonderful group. I actually was a part of it before I worked for Microsoft Advertising. But that's one piece. But yeah, I mean, evangelism in the tech world is me being out there right now. That's virtually
Yeah.
in settings much like this, participating in interviews, panels, speaking at conferences. Think SMX, right? Search Marketing Expo, or
Yep.
Hero Conf, which maybe, knock on wood, we'll be back in person in Austin after the turn of the year. But then it's also writing, and so that's how I made a name for myself in the industry was through writing initially, and then public speaking, and that's carried through now for 15 years of
Wow.
just being a blogger talking about, yes, search advertising, but I've blogged about SEO. I've blogged about native and display. I've blogged a lot about social, not so
Yeah.
much in the last 5 years, but if you can spend money on advertising, it's something I'm likely paying attention to, and just
Hmm.
maintaining that kind of context and big picture view, so that then I can say, okay, how does the Microsoft advertising value proposition fit into that overall view? So the second part of your question was a little bit more about Microsoft advertising. So
Yeah.
um, for those that may not be aware, our primary product is search advertising. So we are the number two competitor to Google Ads when it comes to search. And so that is Bing, yes, but it's also
Yep.
AOL, it's Yahoo, it's a host of syndicated partners, including the likes of DuckDuckGo and many others. And so, yes, Google is massive and not to be ignored. I would also argue that Microsoft advertising, in that sense, is the same. And so, it depends on the country, the market for sure. But in the U.S., specifically looking at PCs, we're like 36% of search market share, maybe in the 20s, I think, in the UK and places like Australia, et cetera. So it's not a small number of searchers, but then it's search, yes,
Yeah.
but we also have a native advertising product that's a part of the same platform. So much like Google has search, display, and now YouTube and a number of other things, our native advertising platform is the Microsoft Audience Network. And so it's a one-two punch. It's search, it's native,
Hmm.
and that's a lot of what our mind share is right now, is talking about the entire consumer decision journey, and how does search interplay with native or display or social and all these other channels, and how does it all come together?
Brilliant. Yeah. One of the things that I love about your role and even what you had shared in the green room is that you have been on the agency side, right?
Hmm.
Now, and then you've also been on the client side where you're in-house, and then now you're at the platform side. And so you have all of this knowledge, all of this feedback that you're getting. And because you're the conduit between the consumer, in this case, the agency,
Hmm.
and feeding back that information over to the engineering team, that is always so helpful. I always appreciated the monthly or the quarterly calls that I would have with my advertising partners and actually have someone to talk to, which for those of you that are watching Agency Accelerated, if you've ever tried to advertise on one platform, you might have always just got an AI, right? And so it's nice to have someone like you where we could really reach out, offer our insights, our workflow, and how to make our lives a lot easier. Because more often than not, we have clients that come to us with budget, and we're like, I need to spend this budget, right? I'm accountable for this. Cool.
Yeah, well, and I would say like I'm lucky to be in the role that I am, and if I look at the three predecessors to me in this role for Microsoft Advertising specifically, we all have something in common, and that is a strong history that is both platform side, but also be that in an agency or in house somewhere, and actually having been hands on
Yeah.
with the work that we're out there talking about, and that shared language, that shared just the
That
commonality,
bond,
right?
that experience. There's
Yeah,
something about agency life when you know someone has been in the trenches of agency life, they understand and you understand and you have this appreciation for systems and workflows. And when you're just trying to launch a campaign and if it doesn't go as smoothly as you wanted it to because a certain setting wasn't turned on,
right.
it's like, John, where are you?
Well, and again, some of our best and most amazing account representatives are the same, right? They come
Yeah.
from that background, they speak the language, and to that point, you call, they'll answer,
Yeah.
and it
That's
matters, right? That customer relationship is super super important. It's the bedrock of everything that we do,
absolutely. Absolutely. Knowing that you have someone that you could have their brain on speed dial when you need something is
right?
absolutely essential. All right, so between the pandemic and the iOS changes that I mentioned at the outset of the show, there's a lot that's changed for advertisers and businesses that want to reach new customers, right? So, what's your take on what's changed? You as, writing all this content and all the things, specifically from a marketing agency perspective, what should we be mindful of?
Yeah. So yes, we've been living through a global pandemic, and that has colored everything that we are all experiencing in work, in life, etc. And not to be ignored or pushed to the side. And this industry has been fast moving, quick to change for a very long time. And change management is is now as important as ever. To say, okay, what is coming at me from Google, from Microsoft, from Facebook, etc., and how do I respond? How do I need to
Mm,
prepare? It's not new, but what I'm sensing from my own point of view, from what I'm hearing from folks like you and everyone that I've spoken to, this year in particular, is that the changes feel heavier. And by that, I don't mean bad, just they feel more monumental and like
mhm.
pivots for the future of the industry. And so, that takes on different flavors. So, one aspect would be advances in automation.
Yeah.
So, automation, nothing new, right? Um,
Hmm.
every ad platform has been striving towards and pushing towards varying levels of automation. And, Microsoft Advertising is absolutely in that mix. However, the advances have been really big and really strong. And I know that, when you think search in particular, there's always this heated, not negative, but a heated conversation between platform and client, be that
Yeah.
agency or in-house, of how much control, right, should
Yeah.
advertiser have versus platform. And, the automation conversation and these advances in automation feels like it swings more towards the platform, but you know, I'm in a position where I get to see the data. I get to see the rationale and the thinking behind
Hmm.
some of these changes, and I can assure you that 9 times out of 10, these decisions are being made from very sound, sound positions, if that makes sense. Uh, but like that's something I think everyone's paying very close attention to, whether you just do search advertising or if you're, an equal opportunity digital advertiser. Automation has been a thing for a very long
Yeah.
time, but it permeates every layer of an account, of a campaign. Now, the other thing here, and it's kind of a layer of automation to a certain extent, and that is recommendation engines. Now,
Yeah.
call it AI, call it machine learning, call it whatever, but these recommendation engines have been a really, really big change in the last 12 to 18 months. And so on the Google ads side, that is recommended ads, recommended ad
Hmm.
copy, but it's also recommended just fundamental campaign changes, some of which, if you take too long to respond to, could be automatically applied to a
Mm,
campaign. On the Microsoft advertising side, where we've looked at that is mostly in regards to ads. And so, if, look at responsive search ads,
yeah.
RSAs. Um, on our platform, we have seen performance in click-through rate, conversion rate, pretty much across the board increase when RSAs are in play in a campaign.
Mm.
But not everybody's adopting.
No,
So
of course. Yeah.
right. And so the recommendation here that in within certain accounts could be automatically applied if not approved within like a 14-day time frame is less about us taking control and more so saying, hey, advertiser, there's this huge opportunity for you to see potential gains in performance metrics if this is in place. So we're just going to help
Hmm.
you get to that endpoint where it's a net benefit to you. And so, but that's a big thing, right? And there's going to be more of that happening. I can see it, coming from Google. I know what's being worked on within Microsoft Advertising, but even other platforms as well.
Yeah.
Recommendation engines are here to stay, and will only
Hmm.
get bigger, right? And we could have a very long,
Yeah,
intelligent
of
argument around the
course.
pros and cons
Yeah,
there,
I
but
mean, having
it's been a
having been
big
on the
change.
practitioner side, I especially mean when I was in like the boot camp of search engine marketing, and when one senior search marketing manager teaches you how to build a campaign, there's like, oh, when they recommend stuff, I would just turn it off. And you're like, well, why is that? It's like, oh, because they're out to get you. They're out to get your ad spend. And so as much as I love AI and everything, I also have a deep love and appreciation for human psychology and what motivates them and what are their fears, uncertainty, and doubts. And I love tech just as much as you do. And I love AI. We've had a bunch of previous guests talk about machine learning and just the advances in the technology, natural language processing, and all the different things, all these different data points that it's able to take in. And I think even as platforms, you know, not specifically being platform specific, but with all of these recommendations that are coming out, I think there's still some type of training or persuasiveness that needs to happen on the agency side. So that way they understand that it's not just here's not just a case study,
Hmm.
but these are all the data, the points, and speaking their language as well as like this is to help you do your job better because you want to get better results that are relevant for your clients and whatnot. And so I think once people cross that bridge, make the connection, then jumping on board is going to be a lot easier for you and all the other all the other
For sure.
recommendations that we're being provided with.
And that's an excellent point. And what I would add to that is that the artist formerly known as the Opportunities tab in both Google and Microsoft Advertising, which is now known just simply as recommendations, has
Yeah.
come a long way. And so I remember, being a practitioner going through those, and it's like really more broad match suggestions. What am I going to do with this? None of this is helpful.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, you should increase your bid, and I'm like, well, that's nice.
For what
Why?
purpose? What would that
Um,
do?
right. So what I would say though is like, and in this case, crediting both Google and my peers in Microsoft Advertising, those recommendations have come a long way and are now fully supported with data saying, hey, if you make this recommended change to a bid or a campaign budget or add X number of keywords that are recommended, here's the estimated performance change and what that actually means to your bottom line. That's a big differentiator because
That
to your
is.
point, just raw recommendations, the wet noodle being thrown against the wall to see if it sticks. Not everybody's going to be biting on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine, as the practitioner and you have a budget and whether you're having weekly meetings with your key stakeholders and they want to know what's going on. And yes, there's a recommendation that comes through, but at the end of the day, who's going to get that email at like 3 a.m. in the morning of like, why is our CPCs not where they're supposed to be at? Right. And it's us. And so I love that you're helping to build that case. Uh, Give practitioners the confidence of this is why you should take this into consideration. Here's all the different data points to support this, the evidence and whatnot, to help us really make a sound decision of how to optimize our campaigns, because that's really what we want at the end of the day. If you could if you could get me the results, right, without putting me at risk in my job, right, because we know the fast turnover in agencies, right,
Mhm.
then by all means give me all the recommendations. But at the end of the day, if I'm like, oh, there goes my phone again, and it's, it's Labor Day weekend, right? I shouldn't be working. Newsflash, if you're in search marketing, that's not a thing.
Mm, right. Um, but no, the 800-pound gorilla in the room when we think about change over the past year and a half,
Yeah.
and you again, you led off the show with it, and that is these really big topics around privacy, identity, and audience targeting.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot to touch on there, and it is certainly on the top of everybody's minds. And part of the reason for that is the uncertainty of it all. So yes, Apple made their decision and rolled things out with iOS, and that was really the push of the snowball, right, over
Yeah.
the top of the mountain, and now it's going down. And so where do we go from here? And so we've seen Google introduce Flock and the privacy sandbox. Microsoft, right, is out with you're talking about Parakeet, which is another recommendation, right? And so at the end of the day, there's going to be a time. I wish I knew when that was, but there will be a time when Google, Microsoft, even Mozilla,
Hmm.
Apple, anybody that has a browser at this point has found consensus on how do we handle this going forward that is mutually beneficial for platforms, for browsers, but is also safe and private for the end user. And I think that everyone has good ideas here and there. That are there loopholes in all of them? It's for somebody more technical than me to figure out, but it's that uncertainty, right? Has everybody, just sort of scratching their chin, going, "Okay, so we're already in it, right?
Yeah.
iOS is already, that first shot across the bow. Where do we go next, and how do we plan, and how do we prep for that?" And that's a much more challenging thing to tackle. And so, really the way that I'm viewing it, the way that the entire team at Microsoft Advertising is viewing it is, look, there are baby steps that you can take today, right? So, you know, yes, it's death of the cookie, but there are some levels of tracking that will still be at play. You can still apply a tracking pixel to a site and get baseline data. It may not be as deep, right?
Yep.
Or as impactful as maybe it was yesterday, but it's still going to be relevant and important when we think about tracking conversions. And that's true today, and it'll be true tomorrow. But it's also planning ahead. Like, what are you doing as an agency with your clients for first party data? How are you handling that? Like, I have been, I would say, surprised. It's kind of a mixed emotion. I guess I wasn't necessarily surprised, but at the end of the day, yes, that so many people who, like, I was like, these people are on top of their game. They know what they're doing, working for really big agencies. And then I see them write about or talk about, yeah, like, we know that we've had these tools like customer match and ways for us to use first party data, but we've not really been using it as
Yeah.
much. I guess I really need to lean into that. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, we've had these tools at our disposal now for years, and to hear people are just now getting to them, like, okay, well, there's no better time than the present. Every time to pick up that torch and run, right? Um, and that's really where things are headed. Is like, what are you doing with first party data? How are you thinking about leveraging the tools that are available at a Facebook ads, at a Google ads, at a Microsoft advertising, as it relates to the data that we all as platforms have, say, like, in market
Hmm.
audiences and the like.
Interesting. Sometimes you don't realize what you have until it's taken away. But so some people
Bingo.
are motivated to stick, right? And so good point, good point. I've certainly heard from many ad agencies as well as former colleagues of mine how dramatically Facebook advertising in particular has gone up as far as cost and down in its effectiveness. And so for agencies where that was once their primary service, what do you recommend?
Yeah. So this is something I've been following along quite closely with. So, on Reddit, There's various subreddits that are very active. There's our PPC, our digital marketing, digital advertising. There's a number of them.
Yeah.
I just can't tell you how many conversations there have been over the past certainly 12 months regarding Facebook, both in like, oh my God, what's happening with my data? Like
Hmm.
the audiences that I used to target aren't working anymore, but even on kind of just the like foundational management aspect of like accounts getting randomly blocked,
Oh
right? Or
gosh.
for
Yeah.
no apparent reason. And then, Facebook's support system. And again, I'm not here to knock Facebook, but like
Yeah.
it is like chat led, and then
Hmm.
you are lucky, right? You won the gold star for the day if you actually talk to a person.
Yep.
And there's a lot of pent up frustration. So all of that being said, when I take a step back and I look at it, it's all about diversification. And I
Yes.
know that there's a lot of people that would agree with me on that. And that is to say, yes, Facebook advertising has been this huge, important thing in the marketing mix now for several years. It's changing. It's not going away, but it's certainly changing. And if you hadn't seen the writing on the wall, or you hadn't already been thinking about diversification of channels, that needs to be at the top of your list for priorities right now to say, okay, we had Facebook. It's different, and we may not be able to get as much mileage out of it as we did before.
Hmm.
But where else can we take our learnings, right,
Oh
from the
yeah.
years that we've run on Facebook? Where else can we take that learning, both from creative, but also targeting and things like that, and apply it elsewhere? And so, of course, you could ramp up on YouTube, on display through Google. The Microsoft Audience Network, right? Our native platform is another area where you could take that audience targeting the same type of creative. In fact, you can even import it from Facebook into our channel, into our platform.
Ding, ding,
Easy,
ding. Wait, I think you need to
easy,
say
easy.
that again for the folks that are deep into
Right.
trance of like, what am I doing with my data? Why
Yeah.
are all my eggs in one basket? And so for those of you that are just tuning in, he literally said, go ahead and repeat what you just said.
So if you have Facebook campaigns, even if they're campaigns that are inactive now because whatever audience targeting you had set up isn't working anymore, you could take that structure and literally import it from Facebook ads into Microsoft advertising, and it'll carry over the targeting as it, whatever the direct corollaries are between the two platforms, and effectively say, hey, here's a campaign ready to target the Microsoft Audience Network, including the creative, right? It'll pull the images, pull that over through the API. So that's like, again, in terms of how can I go from one channel to another, we've made it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
And see, I think a lot of times when we're talking about agency accelerator, we talk about as, since majority of our audience is sometimes creating content from a social media perspective, you can still take that one piece of content and repurpose it across all the different channels that you are trying to grow your audience. And so, in that same respect, what you're saying is if you've had these campaigns that were already created on Facebook, you know the actual data points, how it's actually performed in that specific time frame. What if? What would
well,
happen
yeah,
if you
it's
take
a
that
big
same
question.
structure, that nomenclature, all of that audience interest, and all those different things, easily import it over into Microsoft advertising? Then now you can compare and see,
Mhm.
like, okay, do I need to pay more attention to this? What else can I learn? What else can I do? Yeah.
But of course, I work for Microsoft Advertising, so that's top of mind. But I wouldn't stop there. And I think I heard you say at the top of the call, channels like Quora and Reddit
Mm.
and TikTok. And my advice to everybody is, if there's a channel out there that you think could be an opportunity for you, and this was always my perspective on the agency side, why not test it? Right?
Yeah.
Like work with your clients to have just a dedicated testing budget, whether that's a new
Yes.
feature, a new idea in the existing channels, but even to say, hey, let's go out and try to conquest.
Yeah.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. And so I love that you bring this up because this is something that I actually haven't even mentioned before on any of my shows. And yeah, you should have your marketing budget, but still carve out a piece of it where you could experiment, where you can do your conquering campaigns and just really just test different type of mediums. I know yesterday I was talking to one of my good friends, that I was like, hey, you know what? We have this conference that's coming up, and we have ads running on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram. But we tried something different where we reached out to a major influencer on TikTok, had that influencer do an organic post, and then we put money behind it. And we're like, what? I know. It's like, we need to test that some more. Good. I know. Did you love the sound effects? So more gems that we have, the better our producer will be like, oh, and here's a button. Here's a button.
Well, and I know nobody could see me. Oh, nice. See, now I feel like I'm on just some classic like '90s radio station. No, you couldn't see me, but I was very appreciative of the music that was playing at the launch. Like I'm sitting over here just rocking out. So we're getting into it. So I'm a fan.
Love it. Hey, crew, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about adding the digital advertising landscape, and we're talking about what's changed for marketing agencies, right? But first, a quick reminder and a bonus. This show is brought to you by Agora Pulse, voted the number one social media management tool by customers on the planet's top review sites. And if you're looking for yet another way to increase and diversify your agency's revenue streams, get this. Agora Pulse has a free webinar to help you do exactly that. So head on over to bit.ly/ad agency revenue to sign up. Trust me, you're going to have an opportunity to learn and start driving more revenue from your social media services. So let's get back to the digital advertising agencies, John, because we've covered so much ground and it's exciting. First of all, I would like, honestly, the whole having a budget dedicated to testing. Thank you so much for saying that, because not a lot of people know that. So
You're welcome.
here's another question for you: is what have you seen some of the most successful agencies focus on over the past 12 to 18 months?
So the world of agencies, as most of us here know, is wide spanning, and takes many shapes, right? So I've seen some agencies that play, say, strictly in the retail world, do some really interesting things, and double down on new technologies, and I'm thinking of like a company like Tenuity, right, and making some really smart investments to make sure that they maintain their lead, right, their number one spot, as it were, as like, you're going to work with an agency and you're a major retailer, this is where you need to go, right?
Mm,
And so there's that's like, we could have an entire hour long conversation just on what's happening and evolving in the world of retail. But I've seen a lot of smart plays there. I referenced Tenuity just because they were top of mind, but there've been several other agencies that are clearly on top of it. They're looking around the bend in the road, so okay, where are things going next and how can we be in front of it?
yeah.
But then we already talked about it, and that's the privacy and identity piece. And I feel like the agencies that get it right and are going to be successful in this, post cookie world, as it were, are already in it, as it were, in it, capital IT, um, doing the work, working with their clients, and building smart tools, functionality if needed, but even just a strategy, building a strategy for how are we leveraging the data that we have and how we're going to build first party data now and in the future. Like,
Hmm.
that is smart. And, I have the opportunity to partner with agencies in that sense, and think about like, how do we voice these strategies in the industry? And it's really exciting. And there's a lot of great work happening there. But
Yeah.
then the last point I would make, and that is agencies that, particularly agencies that have just like a really big reach, not just North America, but a global reach. How do they differentiate themselves? And there's been a lot of work around inclusivity, sustainability, and other more values based topics that matter greatly to their clients.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, and the consumer, right,
Yeah.
that's buying or reaching out for services, what have you. And so, that's something, that's a journey that we've been on with Microsoft Advertising, as well, and we've done a lot of work. We actually have this entire like pillar of content that we call, marketing with
Yeah, I was
purpose.
gonna say. Yeah, I was gonna say one of the things that I always loved about, like, so it's September right now at the time that we're recording this and whatnot, but usually when we had to do like a quarterly strategy, it was always helpful to reach out to our account reps and the teams and be like, tell me about the psychographics for my particular end
Mm.
consumer. What should I be mindful of? And just the amount of data and content and research and white papers and all the different things that I would have to thumb through and really dive into to get to garner insights and then put it back into a report to present. Here is my marketing budget recommendation and all the different things. Yeah, reach out. I mean, I can only imagine how much information you're sitting on and how much you have to share with your agency partners.
Yeah, there's a lot of research, right? And so on the that marketing with purpose side, I mean, goodness, and I'll have to pull a link, and I'll share that with you after our
Yeah.
meeting today. But there was amazing research done there. So, general population research, but also research within agencies, right? To get both perspectives, right? So the consumer perspective, but also an advertiser marketer perspective. And then there's a project that I'm actually working on right now. So for those that don't know, Microsoft All Up. So just the big Microsoft has a major sustainability effort in place, and shame on me, but I forget the year marker. But basically, like, not only will Microsoft be carbon neutral, but will have actually made up for all of the carbon used in the entirety of the company's history. It's a major milestone once that's reached. It's a very aggressive goal. Now, come down to my level within Microsoft advertising, just one little corner of a very big corporation. We're actually working with an agency partner right now on what does it look like? Like, how are people thinking about sustainability
Mm,
within the world of advertising and marketing? So, like, we're looking at it inclusive of TV and print and radio, in addition to all the digital channels, right? That all of us here are thinking about on a daily basis. And so the results are fascinating, right? There's a lot of awareness, but not a lot of action on the
mm,
part of consumers in their
yeah.
choices. Like, how are they choosing? Um, you know, or are they even thinking about the fact that when I do a search on Bing or on Google, that there's actually a carbon impact, right? There's a server somewhere pulling electricity.
I
It's
didn't even
being
think about
purpose-fed,
that.
right? Like, what is that systemic chain, and how are
Yeah,
your choices as a consumer reaching back to sustainability? And so it's a big topic.
yeah.
And so more to come on that, but like, smart agencies, particularly those that have influence in the industry, they're looking at outside the box opportunities to have meaningful conversations and really make an impact for their clients, but also just for the industry at large. And it's these types of topics that I think are really, really hitting home.
Brilliant. And shout out to our producer who helped us out. So, for our podcast listeners, Microsoft will be carbon negative by 2030. So, that's going to be really exciting. Good.
Thank you for the save on that one.
Of course, my friend. Oh, we got to always bring out the best in our guest. Good. So, having said that, can we geek out over tools for a minute? Because I don't know about you, but I like to get really geeky about systems and processes and all the different things. So, John, like, what are some of your favorite tools or platforms that today's digital marketing agencies need to consider?
Yeah. So I'll rattle off a couple. And I'll start with one just as an individual. So yes, I work for a big company, part of a big team, but there are still certain tools, things like that, that just we have to get on our own as an individual. And for me, as someone who is managing a personal brand in conjunction with the work I'm doing with a bigger brand, I need tools to help me out with that. And for years, it was Hootsuite, but they went through some changes over the past year, and so I started doing some homework on my own for what could replace that, and landed on Sendable. But more than just like the sharing functionalities of it, what drew me to that, and the reason I mention on that here, just given that I know Agorapulse is a social media tool, the reason I mentioned Sendable is what sold it for me, particularly as an individual, was the ability to leverage it's analogous to Google Trends. So you plug in some keywords, and it will then, on a daily basis or weekly, however you choose to set it, will send you an email saying, hey, we found these conversations based on those keywords on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, Quora, wherever it finds it. And that's
Mm,
huge because Google Trends is, it's Google Trends, right?
yeah.
Right. And even, Google News Update is not always spot on. And this one has been extremely helpful. Like for me to just keep tabs on a few topics um, and themes over the past several months. So that's one. Um, I would also call out Spark Toro. So,
Oh, that's
Brandon
a good one.
Christian,
Yeah.
yep,
Yep. Yep.
formerly of SEO Moz. Yeah, if you're into researching audience and understanding audience and all of these different pieces,
Hmm.
and again, Spark Toro is a very deep tool. But if you've not checked that one out, or at least checked it out lately, you certainly should.
Yeah.
So I think that if whether you're working in social or you're working across the entirety of the digital advertising spectrum, Spark Toro is something you need to be looking at and if not using on a daily basis. Um, Reporting is something that we all have to do at the end of the day, right? Whether you like it or not.
Sure do. Yep.
And there's a particular tool that I've been a fan of for a long time, and that's Supermetrics. And so if you're not familiar
Yeah.
with Supermetrics, it is either in Google Sheets or into Excel, like the ability to centralize and automate data pull through
Hmm.
APIs from Google, Microsoft, Facebook, all of them, right? You name it. It's a
All the
long
things.
list at this point. I mean, that
Yep.
is like when I first got into the space 15 years ago, if I'd have had that, I can't tell you how many hours of my life I would have gotten back, right?
You're speaking my love language. I remember having to do the data pools for all the different things. And then our data scientists would build this data warehouse, which would we all like connect to. And that's one thing I never realized, like getting into search engine marketing was like, you will have to be a master of Excel and pivot
Yeah.
tables and conditional formatting and all the different things. I remember every one of us would have the Excel like book, the manual of like, how do I do this? And you would learn formulas and all the different things. But yeah, Supermetrics is definitely that's in my wheelhouse for sure. Such a
Yeah,
lifesaver.
it's brilliant. And yeah, and again, if that's something that you're not familiar with, I urge you just to go do some research, check it out. It is, yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge love for
That's huge
Supermetrics.
stuff. Yeah. The way that how I would explain it for someone, especially in our audience for Agency Accelerated, like Gabriel, Deb, and the rest of the crew, is if you're familiar with Zapier and how Zapier is able to talk to one SaaS platform to another, like I could have ConvertKit talk to Thinkific and all the different things. Think of Supermetric for that, but also taking in your campaign analytics, your data, but now putting it in a reporting format, right? And so it makes it beautiful and all the different things. Earlier, in our previous episodes, we had the founder of Visme on the show, and it's kind of I don't know if you know this, but it's you're able to create cloud-based graphics, right, and templates and whatnot, kind of like a Canva or an easel, right?
Okay.
But the beauty behind it, what makes them so much more um, easier and fantastic to use for us as agencies is the fact that it then connects to your Google Sheets. So you could have real time data as soon as you create your reports. And so, for those of you that watch Visme, now that we're talking about Supermetrics, tie those two together, and there you go. There's your monthly reporting, weekly reporting, all the different things that you need.
And if anybody's a super nerd like I have been at various times in my life, including right now, proudly, wear my nerd card. Is if you play in things like Power BI, right?
Mm.
You can take the real time or however often the frequency of data pulls that you run through Supermetrics, and then marry that output with a Power BI, and then creating a dashboard that you can just go into and is up to date, all of that, and graphed out for you. I mean, just right, it's
Chef's
perfection.
kiss. Yeah, I remember I once had a key stakeholder. He was the CMO of the agency, and we just gave him one link. It was like one link to rule them all. And whenever he just needed to see data for whatever meeting he was going to be into, because that was like his super genius is like being able to go in and say, I have real-time data. I just click on my custom personalized link, boom, here you go. This is how we're performing and all the different things. It was cool, but also kind of terrifying because you're like, if
Right.
something happened, you're like, oh,
And
all the
when
different
that's
things.
just it, right? I think that in my view, something like that provides a deeper layer of trust with a client to say, hey, like I'm confident enough in the work that I'm doing that you have real time. I mean, they would have access regardless
Sure.
to the end platforms, but to have it all in one place to say, hey, you check it whenever you need to. You don't need to wait for me to send you a weekly
Correct.
report or a monthly report or whatever that cadence looks like. It's just there, right? And if you see something that you should, you want to have a conversation about, then let's talk. And that's what that's for. But
Brilliant.
my
Yeah.
last two tools I would be remiss not to mention are very specific to the search advertising space. And I think they're both doing some things with display on the Google side and somewhat with the Microsoft Audience Network, and that would be Optimizer and Analysis. And so Analysis is primarily about ads and automating the process of testing ads, right? And so putting multiple variations in play and then having that, using machine learning and just some wonderful algorithms that team has built to identify winners, automatically pause, create new variations, and move on based on input from you, the
Yeah.
advertiser and campaign manager. And there are additional flavors and things going on within that tool as well. But like, if you do a lot of ad testing, and you would like to kick it up a notch, check out Analysis. And then Optimizer really started with scripts. So, paid search scripts that you can plug into Google Ads and Microsoft Advertising. They started there, and that's really the kind of the foundation of that tool.
Mhm.
But they continue to build it out, add to it, and at this point are providing amazing tools at a really cheap price, frankly. That provide layers of automation and just general efficiency to the tediousness that is managing paid search
Campaigns.
campaigns.
Yep.
And so definitely check those out because they're game changers, and they're both pretty well established at this point. So I think Optimizer and Analysis are coming up on like 5-6 years of existence and are very much past that kind of seed idea stage and are now
Yeah.
full grown, fully funded companies, startups.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know how hard it is, especially when new companies would try to come over to the agencies and sell us on an idea of change your process. We will make it easier. And you're like, trust issues.
Yay.
Wait
That's a hard sell.
a second. Yeah. So, hey, ad agency accelerated folks, what we're going to cover next will tie everything that we just discussed. It'll tie it all together because we've covered so much ground. My goodness, like we've geeked out so much too. And I'll make it super simple for you, obviously, to go ahead and get started. And so, if you have any questions so far about anything that we've covered, make sure to go ahead and drop them in the comments now. I was taking a look and I saw that, was it Gabriel? Gabriel is running ads on Facebook, Instagram, and Google Ads. No, that's Vladimir. And on YouTube, Gabriel's talking about funnel hacking live. Does Microsoft Advertising, do you have any presence at these more niche conferences like Lead Pages, funnel hacking, any of those things? Because I'm familiar with all of the SEM agencies and whatnot. But what about
Right.
these one-off niche specific ones? Do you go to
I
any
mean,
of those?
to personally, no, at least not yet. And so, yeah, I would actually turn that around into, yeah, if there's a conference or some sort of gathering, as it were, that you think I should be at, even just to attend and listen in, I am all ears always, right? So
Yeah.
always be learning. As much as I give and share information, I'm also always receiving and learning myself.
Yeah, because it's interesting having been and spoken at major social media conferences per se, right? You'll always see a track about Facebook advertising or Instagram advertising. But I honestly, I can't recall ever seeing Microsoft being there. And I think it's a good opportunity, especially if you have the content piece of it, right? And would that make sense for, as social media agencies, when we're working with influencers, should influencers also be thinking about that too, as far as how we're building our audiences and all the different things? So cool.
Agreed.
So, John, how do you recommend agencies get started then with Microsoft advertising, and how should they position their services, especially if they don't find you, at the SEM Expo and all they're not Rand Fishkin fans like us. They're not reading all the blogs and all the things. How do they get started?
Yeah, so it just ads.microsoft.com is where you would sign up for an account. But what I would say is, like, if you're doing any work with Google Ads on the search side or display side, if you've done Facebook advertising on social, again, we have tools to help you import those campaigns into our platform to help you get started in a matter of minutes, right? So it's using the joy of APIs, the magic of APIs, to connect all of the data. And it's a real-time sync. It's just going to pull the information over. And it doesn't remain like an open connection ongoing unless you tell it to. But like, that's really the easy way to get started. Beyond that, I would say, we have an amazing team of people on the support side, but also our account, excuse me, account managers and account executives who are out there working. But if you're a new client, you may not be able to get direct access to them. And so what I would say is, if you ever have questions and you can't find an answer, reach out to this guy on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and happy to answer questions and point people in the right direction and be as much use and help as I possibly can be.
I love that you mentioned LinkedIn, because I feel like that's another platform that some ad agency folks aren't paying attention to, but it's still one of the most affluent platforms to reach out to. And you could target, by job titles and all the different things. And so it's really cool. One thing that I wanted
Well,
to
and we
mention
we have
from
some of that in Microsoft Advertising now too. So we have LinkedIn profile targeting, which would be job title, industry, and company name.
Brilliant. And I'm sure that this is probably something that you could even learn and pick up on as when you become a certified Microsoft advertising professional. Is that right?
It
Yeah.
should be. Yep.
Yeah, I remember I remember for my annual reviews, we always had to get certified in something, right? It was just kind of like get certified in this and certified in that, because you had to, like you said, everything is always constantly changing in the industry itself. And one thing that I love so much about the ad agency experience is that, because for me, I was in charge of EMEA and APAC, right? So
Yep.
that's Europe, Germany, and all the different things, and then, Japan and all the different things. And what was so interesting about coming from the ad agency experience, especially in PPC, was that we had to keep tabs on what the other advertising platforms were doing. We would sit on the quarterly calls for Facebook to see how it was impacting us. And not only that, but we would sit on the calls for our competitors, right? And what was going on. And so I think this is definitely for all of you that have only been focusing on one area. I know that it's nice to have a niche, but understand that consumer behavior is shifting. And if you don't want to be the Kodaks, the blockbusters of the industry, then you have to level up your experience and see what's happening internationally, right? And I
Yes.
love the fact, John, that you had even mentioned about just understanding of values and what people are interested in. So thank you, John. This has been
You.
such a fun interview, and I appreciate all of your insights, all the new tools to take a look at. You had mentioned a little bit earlier on where folks can find you, but let's go ahead and let them know again where they could go ahead and connect with you.
Yeah. On Twitter, JOHN_A_LEE. I think I got that correct. And then I believe my LinkedIn profile link is in the chat. And so that would just be in / the John A. Lee.
Love it. Love it. Good, good, good. And so for the rest of the crew, if you are leaving comments because you are a replay viewer, absolutely appreciate it. Just go ahead and leave that in there for us. And with Agora Pulse, we'll be able to instantly see in our inbox who has been asking questions. So that's all that we have today, folks. And remember to subscribe to the calendar at agorapulse.com/calendar for the rest of the season. I'm going to be live next on September 22nd with Square 11. And in the coming weeks, we'll start to share more about what next season is going to look like. So, Vladimir, Gabriel, you know, if there are certain topics that you're interested that you want to learn more about, I mean, John was just talking about how you need to expand your expertise. Go ahead and let us know in the comments of what specifically you're interested in. P.S. By the way, remember, take advantage of our free webinar on how to add agency revenue by adding social media services at bit.ly/add agency revenue. So I'll see you and your agency accelerating into the next show. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Learn all the different things. I've got flames on the bottom of my screen. Was that
Rocking on over here.
Where's John? I think John wants to come back on screen. He's enjoying this. He's like, thank you. I needed this song. Special thanks to everyone and the rest of the crew. Appreciate you. Our broadcast partners, everyone. Woo-hoo. Look at that. Yeah, see this week, tie that in the super metrics. You guys are golden. Thinkific, super chat. There you go. So can you fist bump? Can you try it? Can you try it?
Art. All the dirt.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you so much.